Art is recording.
Hey guys, this is another episode of Off the Beaten Path podcast. This is episode 7. I'm your host, Nate Stevens, with my co host and brother, Bobby Stevens. And today we have Remi Ferdinand. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So you're a sex worker, but let's start kind of at the beginning and talk about your childhood, where you grew up in, and how that life was.
Okay, so I was born in Anchorage, Alaska, um, at the Native Alaskan hospital up there. I'm Inuit and Athabascan Native. Um, Interestingly, and I'm just bringing this up because it's making a little ding in my mind. There's a whole lot of interesting statistics surrounding sex work and Native women. Not such good statistics either, but aside from all that, it's just I find it kind of interesting that being the case, and I have always sort of been drawn to sex work. But starting with my childhood, I grew up in Alaska. I lived there until I was 13. I was homeschooled for the majority of my life. um, I'm really grateful for it now, even though I wasn't then, because I feel like it sort of gave me an incentive to learn a lot of things on my own rather than relying on other people to educate me, or I should say, relying on the system to educate me. So I've always been sort of like an unconventional person, unconventional upbringing. Obviously, I was also a figure skater for several years, and that was kind of my entire life, was figure skating, homeschooling, learning things on my own. Once I became a teenager, I really wanted to get more into what I would call normal teenage life. um, my parents were pretty strict though, and didn't really want me getting into trouble and talking to boys and stuff like that, which unfortunately I developed a pretty early interest in boys.
Yeah.
I think I was 11 or 12 when I was first like, boys, I like those. those are interesting. Let's hang out
Right,
with boys.
right, right.
So, my parents were like, no, 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 no boys, no boys. And I just, I that pretty much became my focus from the time after that, boys and clothes, things. Um, so we actually moved when I turned 13. We packed up our whole life in Alaska. Me and my younger brother, we flew to Seattle actually and stayed with some friends, some people that my mom used to teach skating, and kind of saw the big city for the first time, because there's no big cities in Alaska. Even Anchorage is still a town. So
Right.
anyway, that was a pretty cool experience, like getting to see that and do that. And then we hopped in a motorhome and drove down and across the entire country. We stopped in Georgia, which is where we would eventually relocate, but only for a short period of time that time. And I went all the way up to Washington, D.C., saw a bunch of cool stuff that I appreciate now, but didn't appreciate at the time.
Of course.
Yeah, that's
I was
usually how
just
it
like this
works.
angsty
Yeah.
13-year-old, so angry about everything. Nobody
Yeah.
understood me, you know? So yeah, I've always just sort of been an unconventional type of person, lived kind of an unconventional life from the start. Um, Relocated to Georgia permanently after that little trip, and entered public school for the first time. So that was interesting. I got into a lot of trouble and ended up right back out about a year later, homeschooling again. And
Mm,
that's how I continued on with my education. So
right. Yeah, and that's Alaska seems foreign to a lot of people. So, what's some of the misconceptions you might have heard of Alaska, and what's some of the things where you're like, no, this was hell. It was hell. You know, it being dark this many hours of the day and only getting this much sunlight. Like, what was it like that you remember growing up in Alaska that was beautiful and not beautiful?
So it's really interesting how growing up in Alaska sort of affected me physiologically, I guess you could say, because I've always been sort of a nighttime person. Like up until the last year, I always had a preference of being up like late at night. I also worked in the clubs for many years, and till 4 o'clock in the morning was kind of like normal work hours for, gosh, all of my early 20s. So that was like another factor, but I still felt for a long period of time that just I would become more awake late at night. And I mean, Alaska's hours aren't always like that.
Mm-hmm.
But especially during the summertime, like it'll be light at like 2 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
3 o'clock in the morning. Like, in order for it to be dark and for you to try and maintain a normal sleeping schedule, you have to have like blackout curtains in all of your bedrooms and stuff like that, which I mean, I don't know, growing up with it, it just sort of, I never really thought too hard about it until later on and realizing how, like I said, it affected me physiologically of wanting to be up later and being on a different time. Obviously Georgia is, I think, 4 hours ahead of Alaska. So I totally changed my hours, but it seems like stayed on the same schedule as the one that I grew up with for many years. So I always thought that that was interesting. Alaska is super cool. It's very much a wilderness still. It's very beautiful. There are things about it that I still find very majestic. I have no interest in living there because I like civilization. There are people who live there who live there for the reason that there is hardly any civilization. Some people live where there's not neighbors for miles,
Wow.
miles, miles. And that's the kind of life they prefer to live.
Right.
So Alaska is perfect for that. Um, I would really like to go and spend some time in my village, which is up in the northern, specifically northwestern part of the state. It's Chitna Village. So I would like to learn a lot about like my indigenous heritage and stuff. Go and really spend some time there. Maybe meet some of my relatives because I don't know a ton about that side. I've always thought that that was kind of a beautiful thing, sort of, yeah, from my past and as a part of my story. That is something I really want to learn about. So I guess if I had to like separate things out into like positives and negatives or pros and cons, Alaska is gorgeous. It's just beautiful fucking state, like incomparably beautiful. But isolated, and wild, and you have to, I feel like you just have to be a little more rugged in general to try and make a life out there. Like, you can't be a little city babe like me, try and go rough it in Alaska. Like, I do have some really, I think, valuable knowledge and skills from growing up there, though. Like, I know how to make shelter and start a fire and do things like that. Like, even though it's been many years since I've done any sort of things like that or went camping or anything, which is something I would like to change, but for whatever reason, just in the past years, I haven't really made that much of a priority. But I still, I know how to do those things because I grew up doing them so often. And so I wish that everybody had was taught those kind of skills, because I think they're very useful in just about any situation. You never know.
Exactly, yeah. And I read a book, I can't remember what it was, but it was a fictional book that was based out of Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And it honestly, it really just blew my mind on because I'd never really researched Alaska, so it blew my mind hearing all of the things that they had to do, how horrible the winters were in the places that they lived, and things of that nature. But and like you said, one and one thing you also said was it being sunlight at 2 or 3 in the morning in the summertime, So yeah,
I didn't,
definitely. It,
sorry.
oh no, it doesn't sound like a state. It's almost like Hawaii. Like Hawaii, it's like, are you really America? Like, is this you're like a completely different. It's
Whole
crazy.
different thing. Whole different ball game.
Yeah, it's
Hawaii is
definitely not American like we're American from the South. It's totally different.
Right.
it is for
Yeah.
sure.
But so you got interested in boys, and at an early age, and maybe started exploring your actual sexuality maybe a little on later in your teens. But what led you to sex work, like, and what was your first job doing sex work? Was it a strip club?
Yes. So, um, I was like, I grew up in a pretty privileged household in a lot of ways. I grew up in a white household, with a overpaid white male who was taking care of everything, like they often are for what they do. Anyway,
Right.
so I was accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and when I moved out, which I did literally the eve of my 18th birthday, because I was ready to be free as a bird and do whatever the hell I wanted to do and not have anybody sort of giving me the side eye about it,
Yeah.
And I like I said, I was accustomed to living a certain way, but as soon as I left, like, there was no monetary support coming from that direction. That's one thing that they refuse to do, is like, if you're gonna go out and live your life according to your rules, you can pay for it too, type thing. And so I contemplated things for a little while, wasn't exactly sure. I had grown up mostly, I didn't like religiously go to church. It's so funny to use it like that. I didn't go to church like crazy.
Right.
But I did go. And so I had a lot of negative misconceptions about sex work. Even starting as a dancer, I continued to have negative ideas about other kinds of sex workers for a long time, actually. But it was like an adventure to me, sort of. And also, I wasn't very shy. So I'll never forget my very first audition. I went in to Follies before it was the Follies it is today. It used to be a little sort of hole in the wall.
Yeah.
So I went in, and the manager was like, okay, do you have your ID, first of all? Because I'm sure I just looked like Bambi, like a little, like a tiny little thing, And so we went into the office, him, and it's so creepy to think of this is how they do auditions, but like, I was just like, whatever. I went back there, and it was him and one of the security guards and little old me. And the guy was like, have you ever done anything like this before? And I was like, no. He's like, you just turned 18, huh? And I was like, yeah, just a few months ago. He's like, okay. Well, can you get naked right here, right now? And I was like, whoop.
Wow.
And he was like, oh, well, okay, maybe you'll do all right. You're hired.
Really? That easy? That's crazy.
I was like,
Wow.
get naked? Yeah, sure, here we go.
That's wow.
I'll never
Man,
forget
I
the
want to know this too.
like, oh, well, all right then.
That's crazy.
Come on in, come to work. So, yeah, I actually only worked there for like a week or so, and then I moved on, went and auditioned at Pink Pony, which was significantly scarier because I was auditioning for the house moms there who were older dancers, kind of, you know, like old hats. They knew just about everything, and they laid me with the critical eye when I came in, and I had already gotten my stomach tattoos by then, and so the one in particular was like, why did you do that to yourself? Damn, no. I mean, we're still gonna take you, but I just wish that you hadn't, and you're gonna wish that you hadn't too.
Damn.
Wow.
Pretty rough.
From a different time.
Pretty rough, definitely. Yeah. But
tough crowd.
Those days, I feel, you know, because this was like in 2008, so like heavy tattoos were not super common in the clubs in Atlanta, particularly not clubs like Pink Pony, which was very old school, or at least it used to be. I have no idea what it's like now. The Atlanta clubs have changed so much. But yeah, I started as a dancer. I was a dancer off and on for many years. There were lots of times when I left and pursued what I refer to as civilian jobs, all of which were complete and utter failures. I'm just not good at having bosses. I'm not good at working on basic shit and being okay with it being basic. Like, I'm always like, this is how we can make this better, and this is how we can do this more efficiently, and shouldn't we upgrade this? And I've worked for a lot of like small business owners and stuff like that who are like, nah, it's cool the way it is. We're just gonna keep on going the way this is. And I'm like, excuse me? This is your business. This is like your livelihood, and you're just cool with shit being all pell-mell fucking hell? No.
Right.
I'm good. Fuck that shit. So yeah, I got pretty tired pretty early of working on other people's dreams, because it just felt like my dreams were significantly more grandiose, and it just didn't work well. But also, I don't like being told what to do. I don't like being told when to show up and how to do my shit and this and that and this. And sex work is a pretty natural path, I feel, for us rebels.
No,
and I want back up for just a.
Yeah, go on, Bob.
I was gonna say I want back up for just a second because we kind of skipped. I feel like maybe some like pivotal points. So you grew up in Alaska, kind of like an indigenous culture, pretty sheltered in homeschooling. You moved to the South. Like, how did you even get introduced to sex work? Because most people probably don't. Like, how did that happen? I mean, like for me, I guess as somebody in my 20s, I knew like strip clubs and stuff existed, but like far as like being introduced to this being a possible path for making money, where did you come across that idea?
Yeah, I guess I didn't elaborate so much on that particular point. Yeah, I grew up, you know, wearing $100 jeans from Abercrombie and Fitch and shit, you know, like I wanted to continue to buy really nice stuff. Like I wanted to be able to buy my own car, and basically I wanted to kind of like stick it to my parents. Like, yeah, guess what? I did go out and make my own choices and do my own things, and I still made it. And so I thought about what would pay the most and require the least amount of qualifications, I guess. I don't know necessarily if I would put it exactly like that, but I can't think of a more nuanced term for what exactly I'm saying. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't give a fuck about school. I wanted to do everything sort of my own way. And I knew it would take a really long time of me struggling and working shit jobs. And so honestly, I just sort of mulled over it a bit, and then thought about dancing. I had never been to a club. No, I take that back, actually. I had been to one random club early, like maybe a few months earlier, like down in like outside of Macon. I don't even remember what the hell I was doing all the way down there, but
Yeah.
we just stopped at this, like, out the way. It was like by a truck stop, this tiny little club. And I remember being fascinated by it. Was, first of all, it was packed, like wall to wall, and then there were just these girls just dancing naked around everywhere, and I was like, what the fuck is this fucking place? Like, this shit's insane. But yeah, I just, when I think about when I decided I was going to go audition, like, I don't even know if that experience was necessarily in the forefront of my mind. Mostly what I was thinking was, like, can I do it? And what's going to happen if other people find out? That was like the main thing in the South.
Yep.
And many years dancing, like, I always felt very, like, it was very necessary to keep that shit on the low. I told very few people about it. More, I think, as time went along. But in the beginning, like when I first started, nope. I didn't want all those judgmental fingers wagging in my face. I was good. But yeah, mainly I don't know, the idea that I had of it was rather glamorized, I guess. I just thought about, you know, like, oh, this is this like big kind of taboo thing, and I bet, you know, people that do it make thousands and thousands of dollars because it's so like, oh my God, and like scary and this and that and this. Which I found out very quickly that that's not at all how the fuck that goes down. I mean, it really depends on like where you go and work and what your appearance is like and things like that, you know, but those thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars are actually very, very hard worked for in most cases. It's all the way around a job, and a significantly more difficult job that requires more know-how and more, I don't even, sophisticated means of like, it takes so much tact, I feel, in order to successfully make thousands and thousands of dollars as a dancer. You have to know who you're dealing with. You have to be able to read people. You have to be able to sell. You have to be able to play different roles depending on who you're speaking to. Like, it's like the most intensive sales position in the fucking world. And you have to do it while naked. It's just the fact that people think that it's just like you go in, you take your titties out, shake them around a little bit, and make fucking thousands of dollars is just the most erroneous and ridiculous misconception in the entire world. But yeah, as far as how I started, like a lot of things for me, it was just kind of like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's do it. Let's give it a try. Why the hell not? You know?
Right.
Like, I'm a little crazy. I'll do a thing that maybe other people might not do. That's cool. And yeah, none of my friends, nobody that I grew up, everybody, when I remember when I first started telling people, they're like, are you serious? Oh my God, really? Are you not scared?
Right.
Oh man, something else for sure.
Definitely. I wanna move kind of more towards the, I guess, political aspect of it and the legalization and all of that. This is something that I know nothing about, but your first post on Instagram is fuck SESTA and FESTA. What I kind of looked at it, but I didn't want to research it too much last night because I wanted you more to explain what are those laws.
So, FOSTA and SESTA were laws that passed a few years ago. I actually need to do some brushing up on the finer details of them myself, and plan to do some pretty extensive researching into them. I want to make videos of my own that are discussing in-depth legal stuff surrounding sex work, and how it affects us and everything like that. So basically, FOSTA and SESTA were passed as anti-trafficking initiatives. But really what they did was they removed a lot of resources for sex workers. Craigslist took its personal section down. There were a lot of escorts working out of that section. Infamously, Backpage was seized by the feds. And that was like a huge thing for so many sex workers.
So is Backpage? Sorry, is Backpage not a thing anymore?
No.
Wow, that was huge.
That was huge.
That fucked a lot of people up, I'm sure.
That was directly responsible for killing a lot of people, I believe. Numbers aren't concise, but like when you remove an online resource from sex workers, a lot of them have to turn to the street or to pimps. And yeah, a lot of people lost their income just about entirely and had to start turning to less safe ways of working. And sex workers in those environments get murdered on a regular basis. It happens way more often than what people like to talk about. And the only way that that's really like portrayed in the media is like the dead hooker on CSI. They turn it into sort of a sad joke when in reality we're talking about
humans,
real people with lives.
Yeah.
And I know a ton of sex workers now, full service sex workers personally. And they're honestly some of the kindest, most genuine, most interesting people that I know. And I just find it fascinating that based on what they do with their own bodies consensually has so much bearing on the value that they have to the world. Because to me, and I think to a lot of other people, they're extremely valuable. They're the people that I choose to spend basically all my time around now. And I significantly enjoy my life and their involvement in it more than I ever did when I was friends with several other crowds. The drinking, partying crowd, the judgy, church-going crowd, none of the different friend groups that I've had. And I mean, there's individuals, obviously, that I've stood the test of time and who I still communicate with and have a good relationship with. But for the majority of the people that I've known, have kind of come and gone and not really left such a good impact, I would say. But a lot of the sex workers that I've met, I've been just really, really positively influenced by, and found that knowing them has been super valuable to me. And so it really frustrates me. People don't understand FOSTA and SESTA and how it impacted real people's lives. People don't understand how criminalization is such a negative and terrible thing that honestly doesn't even make any fucking sense. But everybody's like, people having lewd relations and crazy sex all over the place, like we can only be having that if there's no money involved.
Right. That doesn't make sense.
What?
Yeah, the idea around it. Because, I mean, strip clubs and clubs where women and men are naked for money is illegal. I can go to a massage parlor, I can get fully nude, and the male or woman that's my masseuse can rub me in every spot but my genitals, and that's completely legal. I can have consensual sex with another adult. Obviously, it would only be my wife because I'm married. But you can have sex with whomever you want consensually, and it's fully legal. But then when you involve just exchange of a dollar, it automatically becomes something that's criminalized, and you can.
Even better than that, you can have sex for money if somebody's filming it.
True. Yeah, I mean, like with pornography, you can have sex for money on camera, and very good money in some cases. So it's a very weird system. And I did some research in FOSTA and SESTA myself. And kind of like what you were saying, like it took down y'all's online vetting pages. So like you can make sure you were safe and make sure that the people that you were meeting, obviously you don't know who they are until they show up. But there's some, maybe you could do some video conferencing, or maybe you can do some online chatting just to make sure that's going to be a safe interaction if you do and when you do meet up in person.
Yeah.
Taking that away, it's just very dangerous for y'all.
Yeah, it's terrible. And even going on to like, there's basically an online war against sex workers, and that there has been for a long period of time. Like, payment apps hate us. If they find out that you're using any payment apps for any type of sex work, they will take that shit down. Even legal sex work.
I've heard about that.
Selling nude, that's totally legal to do that. You can sell naked pictures of yourself. You absolutely can. No laws say that you can't. But if PayPal or Venmo, which is owned by PayPal, or Cash App, any of them find out that that's what you're using their service for, they will shut your account down. You're not allowed to do any sort of sexy stuff on any video chatting platforms either. They will shut your shit down. Fortunately, they don't monitor every single one of those, but you just have to be extremely careful. That's another thing that FOSTA and SESTA sort of impacted. Like, it didn't just affect sex worker lives, like it affected civilian people too, and it affected the way that you can express your sexuality online and stuff like that. Like for Skype, which is actually a video service that I do use to video chat with people because it's not like there's a ton of them. Like if they find out that you're doing nude video chats, even if you're like a married couple, they will take your shit. So
wow, that's crazy. So you could literally be married to someone that maybe does a lot of traveling, and it's like, hey baby, let's video chat tonight, and let's masturbate with each other. If they find out Skype or something, cutting it off, taking the shit down, your accounts, it's disabled. Like, that's crazy.
Crazy.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are saying online is that they're fearful of this just opening up the floodgates for anti-privacy and not being able to
because they're
express yourself and losing a lot of First Amendment rights.
Well, so the thing is like FOSTA and SESTA isn't where it ended. They've got the Earn It Act in circulation right now, and they've been trying really, really hard to get that pushed through, and that attacks end-to-end encryption. And when end-to-end encryption is no longer a thing, and any form of law enforcement can get into any messages and read whatever, like that just opens up, that's like a slippery slope, Everybody says it's for your protection, but we've lost a lot of rights over the years in the name of safety. Mm-hmm. All of us, not just sex workers, every human has lost a ton of rights over the past, I don't even know, 10, 15, even 20 years. Like, they've just slowly but surely been implementing all these little things in the name of keeping us safe. But I mean, it's kind of hard to know because there's a lot of corruption, and I don't exactly trust any of those people and the things that they say. I can't trust an institution that has a history of lying to and gaslighting and essentially fucking over its citizens. So I live outside the law anyway. I'm
Hey,
a rebel scum and outlaw.
there you go. There
And
you
let me
go.
ask you this: even with that last thought in mind, some rather prominent politicians on the Democratic side in 2019 came out and said that they were for decriminalization. One, namely, being Tulsi Gabbard from Congresswoman from Hawaii, and then Senator Cory Booker. I can't remember exactly where he's at. And even Kamala Harris, her answer wasn't so direct to BuzzFeed. But even with her criminal prosecution background, it's kind of sketch, especially being on the Democratic side from California. But she even gave like an indication that she was willing to have that conversation about moving forward towards decriminalization. Do you think it's not for those people in particular, but when politicians do that, do you think it's lip service for votes, or do you think it's a potential that we might be making some progress?
I think that everything politicians say is lip service. That being said, I feel as a society that there are a lot of us that are sort of starting to really consider what's important, I guess, and what essentially makes things better for everyone. There seems to be kind of a progressive wave happening, and I mean, it really depends too on where you direct your focus, because you can find a lot of ignorance and a lot of stalemating if you look for it, but you can find a lot of positivity and a lot of progressive thought if you look for it and focus on it. And that's what I try to do. So I definitely see where people are advocating. They're advocating not just for sex worker rights, but for all human rights. And I think it's really important and really lovely to see that. I think that when it comes to rights in general, sex workers are definitely on their way. Like, I'm a part of the coalition here in Oregon, which I'm almost sure will likely be one of the first states to go decrim when it starts to happen. There's just so many of us here. There's so many sex workers here of all kinds, on all levels. It's a very strong community. And I think we're definitely going to see it. Might be a few years. I don't necessarily know so much. Sex workers really do not love Kamala Harris, but it would be cool if she was willing to have a conversation, if she gets in there. This is one of those times where I'm not entirely sure what's gonna fucking happen in November. I'm not really
Oh,
particularly jazzed either way, because it's all kind of a fucking mess. But that just goes back to me being like, whole thing's kind of a little bit of a sham, it feels to me. But
yeah.
That's how that goes. As far as decrim though, I think we're gonna be seeing that sooner rather than later. That's my opinion, and at least that's what I fight for. That's what I'm getting ready to spend a significant amount of my time trying to educate people. I'm really excited to kind of start that with this right here. I've been on one other podcast, a local college podcast too, talking about this, but I hope to talk about it more and more and sort of spread information from the side of like, I'm a people, I'm a sex worker, but I'm also a people. Like, we're all human beings.
Yeah.
And we're valuable too, you know?
You're definitely valuable to me 100%. And I know a few sex workers, they're valuable. And to all the thousands of sex workers I don't know, they're human. You know, I think we we as a society have gotten much better, but especially back in like the 70s or whatever, like prostitution, like you're the scum of the earth, like so yes, there we are all humans no matter what job you do. Just because you may not agree with it doesn't mean that we do need decriminalization because that's going to make things safer. Something I kind of want to touch on is so like marijuana is legal in a lot more states now, and what people are afraid of what's going to happen eventually is it's going to be like cigarette companies that take over, it's a monopoly, and fucks the game up completely. Do you think that that could possibly happen with sex work? Like, okay, it's decriminalized, but in 15, 20 years, when big corporations figure out how to get into it and control it, do you think it's going to like water something down or mess anything up with sex workers?
So there's an important distinction to make there. Marijuana has been legalized,
Okay,
not decriminalized. And
right, right.
when I was working at a dispensary here where I'm at, I went to a little like offshoot of TED Talks. It was called Toke Talks. It was super fucking cute actually, and it was a whole bunch of professionals in the industry, from growers to distributors, and then just a few stoners. Like it was really cool, a kind of a gathering and a talk of people. And I wasn't even aware of the distinction, honestly, between legalization and decriminalization, but it's huge.
Let's
And
talk about that.
it's made an enormous impact. Small growers have a lot of times just sort of lost their ass, and been taken over, by these big conglomerates, these corporations. So it's very, very important to make the distinction between legalization and decriminalization when it comes to sex work, because people automatically jump to legalization as like either they're arguing for or against it or whatever, right? But what legalization really is backdoor criminalization. So it's only okay to do sex work in this setting, and if you have this licensing, and if you do this and do that, still offers no protections and no resources for the most vulnerable of us. And decriminalization is the only way to make things as safe as possible, and to keep money out of the hands of those big corporations, which honestly they already have a market in sex. They may not keep brothels and take a bunch of money, which they do in Vegas, where it is legalized. Not in Vegas, but in Nevada, where it's legalized. They take a fuck ton of money from those girls, and you have to have all kinds of licensing and all this bullshit, right? But big corporations, like they spend an awful lot of time learning about what makes this light up, you know what I mean? And how to get those consumer brains going and excited. They use sex to sell everything but sex.
Right, right.
And that's perfectly fine, right? Like, it's okay to use it of marketing.
Yeah.
Unless you're marketing the real deal, then it's not okay. Just some more of that fucking hypocritical bullshit.
Yeah.
And one thing I think decriminalization will open up also is one thing that breaks everybody's heart is the women that may find themselves with a unscrupulous pimp that might be forced prostitution or very dangerous prostitution. Young girls that, for whatever reason, leave their home or force other homes, who they then find that might be their only source of means. I think what decriminalization will open up to, instead of those women, those young girls just finding themselves at a juvenile center or in a jail, they can then get medical help. They can find mental health facilities. And what people are scared of is, oh, if we just let these people do what they want, we're just going to run rampant. Everybody's going to be having all this crazy sex everywhere, and people are going to be taken advantage of. People are being taken advantage of now, and what I think would happen if we have a shift from let's lock them up because that's a criminal because they broke a law on the books. It's more so, hey, they could use some really good help. Let's give them support. If this is a field that they want to pursue professionally, let's show them how to do it that way so they're not in harm's way. They're not in danger. If they're addicted to any type of substance, they can then find mental health and rehab facilities to help get them back on track. But currently it's you get caught, you're going to jail.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think people somehow aren't understanding. And I say this to people all the time. Like, you understand that victims go to jail. That's it. Sex trafficking victims go to jail. Sometimes they get charged with all kinds of things, like Centoya Brown, for instance. And then there's another young lady right now who's underage and who, you know, murdered her abuser and is going to prison for like this long period of time. And it's just insane. It's insane. They were minors, first of all. And, you know, if you're a minor, people say a minor prostitute. You're not a minor prostitute. You're not a minor sex worker. Those girls are sex trafficking victims, and any other language is conflation. People love to conflate trafficking victims and sex workers. And unfortunately, there is a lot of overlap. I like, you know, what you just said about people who are in this line of work are forced into prostitution, and then when they get out of whatever oppressive situation they're in, they're like, okay, well, now I'm going to do this because this is what I've got, and I know that it can make me money, and I know that I can rely on this. They also probably have some, at least speaking from my own personal thing, I have some issues surrounding intimacy that where it makes sex work feel kind of safe for me because there's no expectations, there's no emotional attachments happening and stuff like that. So I can express myself sexually without having to worry about anything heavier going along with it. So, I mean, you know, the thing about it is sex workers are sex workers for all different types of reasons. And at the end of the day, it all really comes down to consent, of course. And with criminalization, it doesn't matter whether you're consenting or not consenting. Like, they treat all of us the same when we're not. A lot of people really do. They think that way. I hear all the time, like, you can't consent if you're being paid. You're engaging in paid rape, da 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 da. And I'm always like, well, no, actually. Consent still applies at all times. In every situation, consent applies. If anyone does anything that's outside of my realm of consent, whether they have paid me or not has no bearing upon whether or not I'm consenting to that activity. The only difference now is if someone does something without my consent, I have no one to call. I have no one to report that to. I have no one to be like, and I, you know, sharing something that happened to me that is really kind of a huge bummer, and I have nobody to report it to, nobody to call. Someone, I don't know if you're aware of like what stealthing is, but it's means when people remove the condom without your knowledge. So that happened to me, and that's sexual assault. And because I was in a situation where obviously I was with a client, I can't call and make a report about this person and be like, hey, this person, you know, removed the condom without my consent, you know, this is sexual assault, like I need to da 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 da, because I'm a
you were consenting in safe sex, and that safe sex could have opened up a whole new world for you, a whole new life, because that could have led to a disease that possibly you couldn't get rid of. And the fact that you are a sex worker, you can't, hey, this happened, I'm gonna report this, blah blah blah, because yeah, yeah, I think us three and a lot more people have to agree in the decriminalization of sex workers to make it more safe, just with situations like what you said. And you work in a brothel, correct? And in your city, you told me off camera that actually, what is it, like the most brothels per capita in that city? Or like
There
out of the whole United States?
there are many. There are so many. I probably couldn't even begin to count them, and more continue to open up. So
Right. And how how are those able to be ran and not shut down by the law enforcement or anything?
so in my honest opinion, I think that there are simply too many of them for it to become such a thing. Like I mentioned earlier, the sex worker community where I live is very strong. Very, very strong. And that being the case, it would be really hard to come against all of us and our advocates in this state because, when you have a strong community of sex workers, a big community of sex workers, you have, their family that knows, their partners that know, you know, friends of theirs that know and advocate. So, like, there's a huge community of people who are pro sex work here. And I simply can't imagine them coming down on all the brothels when there are literally, I mean, when I say they're everywhere, they are everywhere.
It's like how Waffle House is in Georgia, every other corner.
Describe it like that. Yeah,
They
you
open 24/7.
could describe it like that.
Yeah. Um, Something you mentioned was you said something along the lines of like intimacy issues that you kind of have. What is it hard also to like be in a relationship with the field you're in? Because I feel like that would take a strong man to know that, hey, my girlfriend's going to work. I know what she does, but have you ever run into any issues being in a relationship and maybe them getting jealous at some point?
So, no, because um the only relationship that I have been sort of engaged in during my time of doing this work was a person who was actually excited by the idea of me engaging sexually with other people.
Mm,
So, obviously, that's like a pretty specialized situation that I was involved in. Um, but I can imagine that in some situations it would be hard. Honestly, I am at a point now where I am perfectly content flying solo unless somebody is fully down and understanding. And some people say they are in the beginning and then over,
exactly.
you know, get to be a certain way. But I feel for me, um, I'm not really emotionally available for strong attachments at this time
Right.
anyway. I've got a lot of I got a lot of self work that I need to do, and I haven't been attachment free for any long period of time in my whole, well, since I was 14 years old.
Mm,
um and I feel really good about just doing my own thing for as long as it takes. Maybe, who knows, maybe forever.
Yeah.
I am open kind of to all possibilities. But as far as this work goes, like, anybody that wants to be in a relationship with me will have to understand that I will probably do some form of sex work until I am too decrepit to move.
Right. That's that's actually a question I had. Was this is like a career option, like some a lot of people have jobs, they get tired of it, or they find something that has more money in it, they're going to go there. But this is more like a career. And let's talk about just like athletes, or musicians. That's their career. Eventually they have to hang it up. Have you ever thought about an age of like, when I turn this age, I'm not going to do sex work anymore? Or is it just like you said, when I get too old and decrepit, that's when I'm going to stop?
When I want to stop, I'll stop.
Yeah, that's
But
beautiful.
I just can't imagine, unless it like physically pains me to do so, like wanting to stop. There'll likely come a time though when I am no longer interested in any type of work at all, and I just want to go and lounge around somewhere in a beautiful place and read books and smoke weed all day. That's
Right, right.
that's how I am at, and eat a lot of food. Like, I don't know if you've seen that video with that lady who says, "I'm just gonna get all fat and sassy."
No.
That's how I'm gonna end my time on this earth, just lounging around in a beautiful setting somewhere where it's warm and reading books and getting high and having the munchies all day long. So at some point it'll get to that. I don't know when that's going to be. I have a lot to accomplish before then. That's sort of like the sunset days of my life. That's how I picture them. Right now we're still at the sunrise, I feel, of things. So I feel like I probably got at least a good 20 years of work left in.
Hell yeah.
I guess to kind of start wrapping things up, I know you said you were going to start a channel talking more about the legal aspects and the advocacy stuff.
Yes.
Countries that already have decriminalization and legalization, namely like Germany, Belgium, like in their brothels over there, they have like ID cards that the clients have. They fingerprint before they come in. I mean, there are countries that have moved towards making it a legitimate career, like Nate just said, where the men and women involved in the trade, they pay taxes, they receive health benefits, they have retirements. Like, it's as legitimate as going to school and becoming some business person. Like, it's a real career, and the government not only doesn't criminalize them, they also support it with social structures like the rest of the community. On the advocacy side, do you see these organizations and maybe their lawyers, I guess, pushing towards models that resemble stuff like that to kind of give a foundation for what they're trying to do in America, or do you think they're starting from scratch?
There are a lot of people that advocate for that type of system, which is partial criminalization, otherwise known as the Nordic model. End demand is another popular term for that. There's a lot of problems with doing things that way. Like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't include the most vulnerable of us, because you have to jump through so many hoops in order to do things legally. But also with that model, they criminalize the Johns, they criminalize the customers, and when you do that, you make screening harder, because men feel that if they're going to potentially be criminalized, like, they don't want to give their identity stuff up, they don't want to give any personal information that can be used to identify them, which is how screening works. Like, if you know someone's legal name and you have some of their personal information, it's less likely that they're going to attack you or steal your shit. So there's a lot of issues with that partial legalization, which a lot of people, a lot of false advocates, swerfs, we like to call them, sex worker exclusive feminists, they love that end demand thing because they're so convinced that we're all exploited. And I'm like, well, under capitalism, we're all exploited anyways. So, you know, don't try and trash my way of surviving under this trash ass system. Like, nobody else's method of surviving is any better, really. You've just got some convoluted ideas about sex. So yeah, I see a lot of people pushing for that. And when I hear those kind of arguments for those places, I sort of try and lead the conversation back to decrim and why that is so much better in all the ways. And people are worried about regulations and this and that and this. The thing about it is if you want to make things really safe and regulated to a degree, you just got to open up resources. You got to open up resources and you got to educate, because at the end of the day, people are going to do whatever the fuck they want to do.
Yeah.
And there's really nothing anyone can say about it. You know, like, you can shame them, you can, you know, criminalize them, but, you know, the system of criminalization it's not rehabilitation. It's not a rehab system. It's a punishment system. It's a, you know, punishment porn system, I would go as far as to say, because people just love demonizing vulnerable people, like sex workers and drug abusers and stuff like that. You know, like, people just love to, oh, he's a useless bane on society anyway, lock him up, and who cares about his quality of life, or who cares about her quality of life? You know, she's a streetwalker, blah.
Migrant
But
people get the same thing.
It comes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, no, these are human beings we're talking about. These are people with very complex stories, more than anyone would ever take the time to find out and to learn about. And if you care about people, you care about harm reduction, which includes decriminalization of not only sex work, but also drugs. So.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I just have one more question. I have many more questions. We could talk for 10 hours about this, but I'm gonna end with one more question. It's not really a question, but what would you say to the person that, let me actually go from the beginning. So back in like the 90s, to get your porn, you had to go sneak into your dad's room, get his DVD or VHS tape, but that's something that he paid for. You know, you had to pay for VHS, you had to pay for DVDs. What do you say to the person that says, why would I pay for your mini vids? Why would I pay for this when I have a whole slew of free porn?
What I would and often do say to those people, first of all, why are you messaging me then?
Thank you.
Second of all, I feel like I would be very embarrassed to brag about profiting off of stolen labor. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that you say that so loudly with your chest.
Right.
And feel no reason to be ashamed about that type of thing. The porn industry is a fascinating situation that I have been doing quite a bit of research on. I'm really, really excited to make a video about it because I've always been so curious about, like, how the fuck did this porn disaster happen? Like, how is there free porn, like, fucking everywhere? And it really just comes down to major theft and some really shady bullshit moves by a couple of early companies that basically stole shit, flooded the internet with it, and the production companies had no choice but to play along. So the way free porn was essentially born was a giant fuck you to porn performers.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
You got any more questions, Bob?
Yeah, I'll wrap up with this. I think where we're at, kind of as a society, is we're starting to be more introspective and learning about our prejudices, learning about other people's stories. There's a lot of talk around race right now, a lot of talk around our topic of the day, sex work, a lot of topic around like immigrants and what our immigration laws should look like. And people are starting to kind of peel back the layers of their learned patterns of belief and wanting to educate themselves so that they can drop prejudices and be a society that's more equitable. For people that aren't on the advocacy side yet, maybe even people that are on the far extreme of we think sex work is bad and it shouldn't be done, but they're starting to open up their mind to the idea of looking at somebody else's lifestyle. Where would you send them, either online or in far as like reading materials, video materials, to be able to educate themselves more properly so they can have a better, more nuanced understanding of what's going on?
There is a growing library, I feel, of educational stuff in regards to sex work. I feel like one of the simplest places that I like to send people is to a TEDx talk on YouTube by a lady named Juno Mack. She very clearly and concisely sort of sums up the different legal approaches to sex work in different places, and then speaks from her own experience. She speaks incredibly well. I've watched the talk tons and tons of times. I highly recommend it to anyone and everyone that wants to learn more about this. Otherwise, you know, if you do any amount of digging, you can use the hashtag sex work is work on Instagram and find tons and tons of infographics, helpful accounts to follow. Stop Speaking For Us is one of a really good Instagram profile that I get a lot of my infographics from when I repost, but I'm always reposting stuff, always sharing information about decriminalization. I think if you really want to educate yourself and you really have an open mind and even an open heart, you can find yourself starting to look at humans a little differently with a little more compassion, you know, especially the ones that you've been taught your whole life to look at as less than. So there's lots of stuff, lots of resources. I know that I didn't exactly list out a whole list of specifics, but there's stuff. And then as far as my personal stuff, I haven't launched my YouTube or anything yet, but I'm going to be working really hard to sort of compile information and relay it in a really simple, easy to understand type of way. And I'm really looking forward to being able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I know the video you're talking about. I haven't seen it, but it was going to be part of my research. I just didn't get around to it before the interview.
Great video.
We can link to that video in the description. And also we'll throw those hashtags in there, so if people are interested, they can go find those and look those up.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it was a pleasure meeting you today. Thanks for your time. Thanks for all your insights and sharing your story and just being open. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys having me.
Definitely. Thanks for coming in. Love you, Remi, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.